Hey folks, so today I got a while ago, I got a request to make a tutorial on how to make characters for your paper computer games. And that is a really good question, so today I thought I would answer it. This is sort of a complicated question. I mean, I can't really tell you how to make paper computer game characters, at least not completely, because it has to come from your own imagination. That's the thing. Paper computer games, just like comic books, just like movies, just like anything, can be about anything. The PCG universe is just filled with all sorts of characters of different types and classes, and if I told you if there was one easy way to make those, it wouldn't be as diverse and interesting and cool. I mean, some of them are aliens, you got robots, ghosts, elves, or even sometimes just ordinary people. And so it really has to come out of your imagination, and that's good. But I do have some general tips which might be helpful to you, so I'm gonna try to give them to you in this video. So let's get to it. So there's two main types of character in a paper computer game. There's the main character, that's the character you're playing as, the character you're controlling, and then there's everything else. And these are the characters that you interact with. Some of them are allies, some of them are enemies, but fundamentally, you don't control them. Though there's an asterisk to that. There's also your teammates. That might be a little bit different because your teammates, you can sort of control to an extent. Like if they're really on your team, you can just say things like, okay, I'll have Tutorial Bot fly up and grab that thing, and he will. So you can't really control him, but it's very close to you being able to control him. Like 90% of the time, he'll do what you tell him to do. But this is a very important general rule of thumb for all these types of character. Try to make your characters fit into the gameplay. In other words, sort of build them into the gameplay. Don't think of characters as like just things you're sticking into your game. Think of them as part of that game. These are things that your players have to interact with. To show you what I mean by that, I've got the perfect example. One of the biggest PCGs I ever made was called Balzac Lobotron, and I spent a lot of time developing that. And in that game, what I did was, I wanted you to have your own starship that you were going to control. It's called the Tabernacle. And I created a whole crew of characters for that ship, and I made them as diverse and weird and interesting as possible. You got Matak, who's like this grumpy alien but he's also a scientist, but he thinks he's superior to everybody. You got Philby the robot, who's like the security guy. You got Johnson, who's like, he kind of has like a bird nose kind of, and he's the engineer, and he has 6 arms, but instead of using his arms to do repairs on the ship, his arms are all disabled. He's like paraplegic, so he jumps around and uses his feet instead. And I spent all this time developing all these characters and thinking about their backstories and all this stuff, and none of it mattered. And you know why? Because my fundamental mistake was I didn't build them into the gameplay. When Chris was actually playing the game didn't require him to talk to any of these people. He didn't need anything from them. So when he went over, he explored the ship, he talked to them like once just because he was curious. But then when he went through the game and, he's playing mission after mission, he's exploring this planet, exploring that planet, he never spoke to any of them pretty much ever again. And until there was one point late in the game, he has to talk to Johnson again, and he's like, wait, who's Johnson? And it had been so long since we started the game, he just didn't remember. And, okay, you could say that's because it took us so long to finish the game. It took years. But, on the other hand, that's because the characters weren't memorable. And they weren't memorable. It has nothing to do with how good they were as characters. It has everything to do with the fact that there was no reason for him to talk to them. He didn't need them. They didn't add anything to the gameplay. They were just there because I thought they were cool characters, and that would have worked perfectly fine if this had been a TV series or a comic series or a novel series. But as a paper computer game, it didn't work because there was nothing for them to do, to add to the gameplay. You always got to think about how a character interacts with the game. Now, by contrast, I think Kurt made a brilliant paper computer game back in the day, which was called Spaceballs. And he also created a whole cast of characters for that game. And, a lot of them are really colorful and really memorable, just like mine. You got Tutorial Bot, the robot tutor who is useless as a tutor, but flies around and gets you stuff. And you got Woob Woob, who's fantastically unlucky and dies all the time. You got Killbot, who's trigger happy and always wants to shoot everything. And the thing is, his characters were so much more memorable than mine, and for one simple reason. You needed something from them. When you were being attacked by Spaceballs, by these armored creatures that were trying to take you down, you had to go to Killbot for help. You had to use his firepower to fend them off. And you had to go to Tutorial Bot to try to reach faraway objects. You had to go to Cleaner Bot to get into tight spaces. Every single one of these characters had a function. They were there for a reason. They helped you interact with the game. And those are characters who I would put into the category of allies. Like, it's easy to make allies fit into the game because they are, sort of extensions of yourself. Only put somebody on your team if they're going to help you interact. That's going to make the players engage with those characters more. It's going to make them care about those characters more. And if one of them dies, they're going to feel sad. Whereas in Balzac Lobotron, if Johnson died, Chris wouldn't have cared at all because he doesn't know Johnson. He hasn't had to interact with Johnson. And it doesn't matter how good of a character he is. If Chris never has to talk to him or never has to do anything with him, then he might as well not be there. The same is true of enemies. If I create, a random, Bazinga Beast, right? And it could be the coolest enemy in the universe, but if their coolness doesn't somehow have to do with how you interact with them, then it doesn't matter. So like if I can just say shoot them with a gun I already have with one shot, then I don't care about the Bazinga Beast. It doesn't matter how cool it looks. It doesn't matter how interesting its backstory is. Nothing matters. All that matters is how you interact with it. Now, if the Bazinga Beast has an ability that it's like, whoa, maybe the Bazinga Beast slows down time around him, so you can't just shoot him so easily, right? Maybe then they'll remember the Bazinga Beast because you have to interact with that thing in a unique way. So and that makes the player more interested in the backstory of the Bazinga Beast. They want to learn more about what it is and why it's acting the way it acts, and so they can figure out how to stop it, right? So if whatever unique characteristics you give it, it can't just be a story thing. It has to also be a gameplay thing. Same goes for random townsfolk you meet, NPCs, people you meet along your way. You can create whatever kind of backstory you want for them. It doesn't matter. The characters are only going to care. The players are only going to care about this character and be interested in who this character is if their backstory is somehow and their presence is somehow tied into the gameplay. That can mean a few ways. Like with the enemies thing, I gave the example of a special ability. It doesn't have to be an ability. It could just be that maybe this townsfolk, their tragic backstory is somehow tied into how they're useful to you. Maybe they used to work at the castle and have a personal backstory with the guy who owns the castle, who's the guy you're trying to stop. Yeah, if you want to get people involved in your characters, tie those characters into the gameplay somehow. That works for all different kinds of characters, and it even works for the main character. Now, the main character this is the least true for, because the main character can sort of be just whoever they want. Because their main purpose is that they're here to experience the story, right? I mean, so main character can just be a random person. Their backstory doesn't have to be tied into the gameplay as much. But I will say that the more you tie them in, the better. And especially if those characters have a special ability or something, you should build the gameplay around that ability. Let's say, for example, that you create a PCG about where you play as a character with laser eyes, right? That's cool. Laser eyes are cool. But now imagine that when you actually make the PCG, all the puzzles are like, oh, lasers don't work on this, lasers don't work on that block. You're just gonna have to figure out how to push it normally. That's lame, right? I mean, if you're playing a character who has laser eyes, you want to be able to shoot stuff with your laser eyes, and you want that stuff to break. I mean, I think that's a basic requirement of playing a game about a guy with laser eyes, right? And like, so if you're doing that, you gotta tie it into how the puzzles work. So it's like, yes, you can break things with your laser eyes, but which things should you break? How? In which order? Right? Like, what's the best way to use your laser eyes that will let you beat this puzzle? That is a good use of a power in a PCG. It always has to be tied into the gameplay. Again, not every character has to have special powers. It's fine for a PCG to just be a normal person, just a normal human, right? They don't have to have any special powers. But if they do, those powers better have something to do with the gameplay. A really good example of this is my PCG Inventory Man, right? So the premise of Inventory Man is you play as a character who is an inventory screen from some other hero in a PCG. So there's some other hero running around having a PCG adventure. That guy dies, and he didn't say save game, so now he's dead, but his inventory screen still exists and has gained sentience. So now it's alive, and it's running around in the world, and it has to get back home and complete the hero's mission in order for it to get to inventory heaven, or whatever I called it at the time. And now, so Inventory Man's ability was that, you know, he's not a person, he doesn't have a physical body, he's just an inventory screen, which is abstract. All he can do is sort of take things out of his inventory and control those things, and put things that are directly in contact with that thing into his inventory. And the whole game is designed around that. And Chris had a lot of fun with that game. It's probably, like, I put so little effort into making this game, and it's probably one of the best paper computer games I've ever made.
Okay, so I'm gonna roll along. I'm gonna sneak up on this guy because he's not suspecting a pipe. I want to magnet onto somebody's keys in their pocket.
Oh, okay. All right, that works. You do make it to somebody's keys, and they're like,
I take their keys, I take their wallet, I take their phone, I take everything in their pockets. Is it bad that this is my dream?
And I mean, because I tied it in so much, I tied his ability in so deeply with the gameplay. So a lot of the game ended up being him pulling pranks on people, him doing, like, taking advantage of his unique ability to find weird ways to solve the puzzles I put himself in. And a lot of those solutions, I didn't expect him to find, you know, like, I didn't think of that beforehand. It just kind of naturally grew out of the situation I created, because the game is so based around this character having this ability that he is not a person. He is, you know, whatever items are in his inventory screen. If I had made this game just a little bit different, it would have been terrible. It would have been terrible if I had created a game, the same premise, you're still an inventory screen and you can still use inventory, but in effect, you're basically just a person trying to get past puzzles, right? Like if you know, he could say, okay, I'll go over there and I'll pick up that thing. If that worked, like, and you could make a game like that. That would make sense, but that would kill half the fun of it, because then you're just an ordinary character. Then being an inventory man doesn't feel any different than being just an ordinary person. The way mine worked is that, like, he couldn't move without using something in his inventory that can move. So he could take a ball and roll it across the floor, and then if that ball happens to roll into something, he can move along with the ball, sort of, but he can't just walk on his own. All he can do is the inventory, and that is what made the game work. Hey folks, sorry to make this a two-part video, but it was just getting way too long and I had more minutes. Like, this was only the first topic, there's gonna be a whole nother topic to cover, and I'm like, alright, clearly this has to be two different things. Anyway, thanks for watching, folks.